Welcome, everybody, to the Resilient Minds podcast. I am very excited to be sitting here with Chris Nelson, who is the founder and CEO of Ashiyana. Chris and the Ashiyana team have really been developing the best me approach to well-being for almost a decade, really giving a lot of emphasis of this own work that you've been doing within his own centers. But Ashiyana is really the space that will be creating a lot of events in the future. The revival at in Alto Paraiso, and it's also a dear place that has changed my soul and my experience of life and the way that I choose to operate. So, Chris, thank you for creating the space. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for being you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Eric. I really appreciate it. Hello to everybody. Um, so, yeah, I guess maybe it's interesting just to say how we kind of know each other, Eric.
Please.
So, yeah. So I created Ashiana, or to say it more correctly, Ashiana came through me 18, 19 years ago, where I found myself creating a retreat center in the beautiful North Goa beaches, or on one of the beaches in the north of Goa. And it was a palm grove on a river. And the first thing we built was a bridge over that river. And this was just straight out of childhood storybooks, from my past. This dreamy little, you know, palm grove with swaying palms in the tropics, right by the sea, the Arabian Sea, but on a river. So you had the magic of the sea, but you also had this kind of very meditative quality of the river and the bridge over it. And it was almost as if you went from the beach stretch, the dunes, which was kind of India, it's the soft version, it's Goa, but it's India. And then you walk over the bridge and you enter this kind of land of tranquility and calm that became Ashiana. So that was a gift. Maybe 15 years later, we created Brazil, and that's how Eric and I come to know each other. I was there in 2020 at the very beginning of the pandemic. No better place on planet Earth to be during the pandemic. And I think more or less the day I left, a day or two later, Eric arrived. So we missed each other then, but our energies connected. And here we are now talking about similar kind of missions and visions that we have.
And I just want to add the fact that the energy that you left Ashiana in, and the space that you really cultivated this in, um, it was something that allowed me to stay in a realm of possibility of expansion versus what during the pandemic especially was encouraging most people to kind of box themselves into, enclose. And I was definitely in a mind space at that time where I would have rebelled really strongly. So it's like the universe carefully, divinely placed us in its order, um, to allow me to really go through that deeper introspection. So thank you for taking the time to do the work that you do, so that you created the space, so that naturally allowing me to come in and expand. And so I know that there's a divine order there that we get to be part of, and we choose to actually now be conscious of. And I'm excited to really expand on, Alto Paraiso, why this is such a meaningful place for us. And also, some of the common misconceptions around Brazil, Alto, the perspectives that are there, because I think that we have a duty to the space and the place and the reverence of it, that allowed us to discover this deeper part and wisdom within us, so that we can truly help others navigate that part of themselves and shine like the sun. Because I definitely, for myself, I found something really special inside my heart that really cracked open. And of course, there were challenges, as I mentioned, and there will consistently, but those challenges now become my learnings. And I see things from a completely different perspective, where in the past, before going there, I would have felt like a victim, or blamed others and persecuted, or felt like I needed to, you know, carry the world on my shoulders alone and like compete with everybody. And I think that this is a common paradigm that sits, with a lot of Westerners and even Easterners, maybe even now more so as things are coming together. But it's important that this duality, we emphasize the path of confusion and the path of nature. And I believe that path of nature is one that we have really chosen to be a part of. And those principles that guide us are the ones that define us. And it's also why we resonate so deeply. So tell us, brother, for you, why Alto became a meaningful discovery, and then what are some of the things that most people, when they hear of Alto to you, what are some of the things that you can like say, hey, no, like this is not Brazil. Brazil is a completely different perspective than you think it is. I know I went
Okay.
deep there, but yeah.
No, 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 it's beautiful. It's perfect. No, no, it was nice to ask those questions. So, I mean, I think that for me, my experience in life is that the big stuff, the big decisions, the big transformations, the big steps forward, they're all part of our dharma. I mean, ultimately, it's all part of dharma. And when I say dharma, what I mean by that is our path, our purpose, our inner calling. You can say it in many different ways. You could call it ikigai. It's why do I get up in the morning? Why am I here? Why was I put on this planet? And I think that the big things that I see that have come through me in life, Ashiyana being the biggest of all, 3 retreat centers, an on and offline support system, all of this is what I was meant to do. So was it difficult? Hell yeah. Have I been through endless challenges? Yes, God knows, yes. Did I ever doubt that I would continue? No. And it's not because I'm some kind of superhuman being. It's purely because I just intuitively recognized that this was my path. I just know I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. So I can't not do it. So when I was sat in Goa and I was invited to come out at the end of our first season, I was invited to come out to Brazil. This was 17 years ago, to a place called High Paradise. Well, for me, that isn't an invitation you turn down. When a beautiful woman says to you, do you want to come out to High Paradise and check out this new place? Brazil had always been on my bucket list, so that wasn't a tricky decision. I went out there within a few days. I've been offered this incredible piece of land. In fact, just to say, even more synchronistic, I asked this girl that introduced me to the place back in Goa that talked of it. I said, "Is there land to buy?" Because I just love land. That's, one of the ways I love to express myself, buying land. And she said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, there's land." And sure enough, 3, 4 months later, I was out there. And within 3, 4 days, I'd basically done the deal to buy a piece of land. And for me, it's just an utterly mesmeric, otherworldly piece of land. I mean, you have to understand this area of Alto Paraiso. It's in the high plains of central North Brazil. These plains have a dry and a wet season. And in the wet season, it collects enough rain that it gives water to half of Brazil. But it's not like it's torrential rain permanently. It's there and it's off. You get sun, you get rain. And then you have a dry season. This is 3.5 billion-year-old rock formations, which are the most crystalline on the planet, 2,000 waterfalls. This is not your normal average kind of spot that you go to on holiday. This is something quite different. And the little local town of High Paradise, Alto Paraiso, has 7,000 people in it. There is a lot of poverty there. There's no getting away from that. These are simple people living in simple homes in a simple way. But you don't get that kind of, often in inner cities, you get that unpleasant resistance between the poverty and the richness of a city. And that's what causes so much of the problems in cities, the drug problems and so on, and theft and all the rest of it. You don't get that there. This is one of the most peaceful, calm, quiet, unprepossessing places I've ever seen in my life. I come from London, and not a particularly dangerous part of London. But if you're in the wrong place in London, or even in the right place these days, knife crime, gangs, it's gone through the roof. And this is the same in all the big cities. This is symptomatic of the world today, unfortunately, sadly, because we're going through a very crazy time in human history where there's such a divide between the haves and the have-not, and a million other problems that go with that. But Alto is like just a little sanctuary away from it all in the high plains of Brazil, and yet very accessible. It's only 2.5 hour drive from Brasilia Airport. And Brasilia is super accessible from both Europe and from the States. So, I've been going to Goa from the UK endlessly for 25 years. It's the same distance, it's the same travel time, it's just as easy. But for some reason, people have this idea that they're going to be met by gun-toting gangs of nutcases high on meth. It just is nothing to do with that. It's beautifully calm and peaceful and otherworldly. You're more likely to be, to see a pterodactyl in the sky than you are see a gun. So, this is peace incarnate out there in high paradise.
I really agree. I mean, peace incarnate is really such a beautiful picture that you're sharing because I felt like I found heaven and I found it
Mhm.
in my heart, right? I found it in my heart, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, it's around me. And so it changed my my inner nature so strongly that it had allowed me to continue this, like it integrated me like it so deeply to really continue to look at myself and say, hey, there is places like this in the world. And once we anchor that inside of our hearts, really, it it's easy to create it everywhere. Instead of seeing what we don't have, we can be so grateful for what we do have. And I think that this has been one of the biggest misconceptions of my life, you know, uh, society's mediocrity, and society's mediocrity creates these expectations of limitations versus discovering a part. Because again, I was so stuck in my mind, right? I didn't pay attention to the feeling of my emotion, and I could be like passionate, and then it would stop, and people were like, "Wow, Eric, I love your energy," and I'm like, what? What does that mean? Like, how come everybody is saying, Eric, I love your energy? Everyone I meet, and then it's like, to me, I don't even understand my energy, right? So I needed to, what is it about myself that I am not seeing? And this became such a curious question since a little boy, because the external world, again, living in Canada in this northern space, of do or go out there and find the materials and spending more on materialism and taking away from the striver and driver and achieving versus what's like more fulfilling, what's really the fulfillment in our path. And during the time that I went to Alto, this is where I was struggling. I was super achiever, and I wanted to understand, why am I here? Like, if I'm creating all of this and I really want to discover more myself, what's the point? What's the point of all this material if it doesn't mean anything? And that was ultimately the question. And I find that a lot of you know, quote unquote impoverished, or people that may not have as much material things, and especially a lot of people that I noticed in Alto like that actually are way more abundant. They're way more in tune with the values and the principles of true benevolence. And I saw this in India. I've seen this, in all over the world, in Dubai, even, like a lot of people from all over the planet. The real benevolence is actually in their behavior. Their real wealth is who they are and how they show up. And this to me became like, this makes no sense. So, if you don't mind, Chris, what's your perspective on this? Because I know you have a retreat center in Goa, as well. You've been on this path as well. What is your perspective of this inner wealth creation and this inner journey of really choosing to find the value of abundance, of showing up in this capacity? Because whether I go to a village or not, whether it's in India or Brazil, in all of a sudden, or Ecuador, anywhere really, all of a sudden there's way more of that authenticity, and that's what I find most meaningful.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the early years of being in Goa, I was obviously hanging out with a lot of Indians, my staff and the management team and so on. And they used to smile when we talked about, us foreigners would come to India and we'd go around the poverty-stricken, outback of India. And we'd look at these poor people and we'd go on talking this way, the poor people, the poor people, the poor people. They say, do you think they're any less happy than you are? And over time, I came to realize that these people with very, very simple lives who had nothing in our sense of what that means were probably a heck of a lot happier than we were. And far from, the appropriateness of us feeling sorry for them, they were probably feeling sorry for us. Now, the sad thing is that, westernization, so-called, developed world, materialism, um, comes to India, has come to India and Africa and all the developing world countries. And they're now sucking up all of this nonsense the way that we have done. And that's not to take away from the magic and the power of the digital world and the incredible devices that we have, but the way that we've become lost in them, consumed by them, utterly no longer the masters of them, but they've become the masters of us. This is a very sick society that we live in. And I think you said something earlier on, which I really relate to, which is that you talked about nature. I think that when we disconnect from nature, we become divorced from nature. We become divorced from our own inner nature. And you see this with these people that are living these simple lives, these native people, these indigenous people who are foraging, going around collecting their own food, making food with their own hands, planting with their hands, utterly connected with the cycles of the moon and the sun and the stars, ultimately completely connected with the climate. And they sense, just like the birds do, if there's a storm coming, they read things just like the animals do. We've lost all of that. We are utterly disconnected from Mother Nature, the majority of us. And I think that the fact that we all live in these huge megalopolises, millions and millions of people, we don't just lose connection with ourselves, we lose intimacy because we have no inner connection. And therefore, we find it very hard to look at somebody else across the bus or metro or whatever it is and show any degree of love or even just, some civility because we're hiding, we're scared, we're in that, somewhat active stress, fight or flight state. So, you talk about showing up and so on. I think the first step in being able to really show up and be in touch with who you are and what you are and your purpose and why you're here, get back in touch with nature. Get out into nature. Grow your own food. Climb trees, hug trees, whatever the heck it is you want to do. Swim wild in nature, rivers, lakes, and so on. Take a cold plunge in a local river if you can, or whatever it might be, because these things are the very essence of what it is to be human and to remember that we're deeply connected with Mother Nature. Heck, we are Mother Nature, but we don't behave like it. It's like we're in a war against nature. And I don't want to babble on for too much longer, but in many ways, if you look at the last few hundred years, you see man's intention, man and woman's intention to almost usurp Mother Nature and convince him or herself that somehow we're better than Mother Nature and that we actually need to support Mother Nature in actually making things work properly. I mean, what a ridiculous state of affairs. Everything is perfect in its natural state. If we came back to a natural state, more connected with Mother Nature, our lives would change immediately.
This is the path that I really, that duality of the path of confusion versus the path of nature. And I'm so grateful, brother, I'm so grateful that we are recognizing the patterns of the past and that we are choosing not to repeat its cycles. Because oftentimes I hear a lot of people, speakers, intelligent people talk about cycles. And I hear, oh, this is just the way the cycles have been for the last 100 years or 80 years or thousands of years. And it's like, okay, well, let's change that cycle. let's do something about it. Why don't we actually activate a change so that that cycle does not repeat itself? Because the sooner, if we can recognize these patterns, because many of us can, then there's an opportunity to actually utilize our strengths and our resourcefulness, recognizing each other's wisdom, choosing to kind of come together, not kind of come together, and then create new patterns so that our children or our children's children don't need to actually repeat the patterns that we haven't paid attention to. And so this is something that like I believe is so incredibly powerful when we choose to say, hey, enough. Enough of these old prehistoric belief systems where we need to create separation. Now is a time of change where we can actually revive our ability to choose. Okay, we don't have to compete. There's no competition here. We're on the same team, right? Like, what's going on? We're on the same team. Let's keep moving forward and all shine like the sun. I don't know all the answers. However, I would love to learn them from people that know or are on different paths or have different strengths because I have tons of weaknesses and lots of blind spots. So, what's the most beautiful thing that we can do is ask and be curious. And I find that if we stay more curious and innocent in this paradigm, that then we give a really safe space for our kids and our beloved, counterparts, the feminine nature, the real feminine nature, Mother Nature, to come through us all and show up with this place of, hey, let's support, let's guide, let's help. And as a result, we make things happen. And so this is that beautiful dance that I recognize as like the masculine feminine presence of really working in harmony to cultivate this safety and this divinity of choosing to operate where our I don't have kids yet. I can't wait to be a dad. Although I feel like a dad a lot. I have that father energy because my parents are amazing. But what I've seen is like my mother and father were always there for me. And so I've learned by them being of such deep support to me. And they continue to be, by the way, so it allows me to keep dreaming and keep creating and keep believing and keep moving. And it's no longer a belief because the experience that I've walked in my path has given me so much certainty in knowing that whatever shows up in the external world, I have the tools inside of me to say, hey, let's figure this out. Let's work together. And so that is where I get curious of this nature's path. How do you feel about breaking these new cycles or creating these new cycles, my apologies, and breaking these old cycles? And Buckminster Fuller, I think, said it the best. It's not about fighting the old anymore. It's about just creating the new.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Buckminster Fuller myself. I think we live at the most amazing time in human history. This is my feeling. I think we're, in one sense, in desperate straits. Our air, our water, our food, our soil is a disaster. We are wantonly destroying the biosphere. There is more aggression than there is love manifest in the world very often. And, the consequence of this is that many people believe we're actually facing the possibility of extinction. Now, I don't personally see it that way, but the very fact that people feel that way it means that we're in pretty desperate straits. We are confused. We live in a fantastically complex, stress-filled world. And I feel like two polarities are being created and have been, for many years. And it's a choice. It's which polarity do you want to sit in? Do you want to sit in the polarity of, buying into the status quo, being part of the system, trusting your government's going to take care of you, trusting that the system is there to support you, trusting that everything's going to be great, until you gently pass away in 50 years' time? Or are you in this other polarity where you recognize that you weren't put on this earth to be taken care of by anybody other than yourself, essentially? And that you need to be independent of mind. You need to be free from status quo thinking. You need not to trust your government or anybody else, not because you're an anarchist, but because you recognize that systems are broken. Our systems of government, societal management, you know, economics, everything is a mess. And I think this is the most beautiful time to be alive in human history. And I think it's pushing people to awaken. In times of hardship, people awaken. During the Great Depression in the 30s last century, it was the most profound time of change, awakening, entrepreneurial spirit. You know, incredible things happened. And we also know that in the West, we've had a pretty easy time for 70, 80 years. No world wars, no huge significant problems. That's made us soft, lazy, ignorant. And there is a desperate need for us to become galvanized and strong and a collective and collaborate. And if enough souls come together, which seems very clearly to be the case, will drive this positive polarity in a good direction. But I don't have any kind of false illusion that everything is just going to suddenly become wonderful on planet Earth. We're all going to wake up and it's all going to get great. I don't see it that way. I see two polarities, and I think you're either in the fear polarity or you're in the polarity of positivity, love, and possibility. As much as you can be. We don't have to be unrealistic here. It's not we wake up and we feel great every morning, or that we're permanently being the best version of ourselves. That's just, you know, Jackanory. That's an Englishism. That's just a fantasy. That's not real. But we can strive to be our best. We can strive to be in this positive state of mind, show up as the best version of ourselves as much as we possibly can. You either have that intention or you don't. And that is a beautiful possibility today.
It's nice to hear such sound words come from wisdom, because I think it's way more important for us to hear each other, truly hear what we're saying or hear what you're emphasizing, and then as a result take those actions. Because one of the things that I find, and from my journey, is like, hey, we actually don't want to just be love and light, and we don't need to be love and light. The shadow is a really great part of us as well, that makes things happen, that takes actions, that chooses to operate in a place of, hey, we got to make this happen. And you mentioned entrepreneurship, you know, and I think that this is one of the great ways that entrepreneurs, business leaders can really step up, because I always believe that business is a spiritual game. This is my philosophy. This is something that I also learned from Tony Robbins, and I believe that this is something that really, for me, is very meaningful. And I remember hearing him say that and being like, "What? I don't get it." And I find that everything is now spiritual. You know, like everything, every moment, every experience. You know, life is an altar. Each moment is a prayer. And so if business is part of that, or how we choose to change our behavior and emphasize a meaningful approach towards entrepreneurship, how can we now start to consciously design business models that are in benefit of the organization and its behavior, and then as a result, create that impactful experience to the communities we are destined to serve? And that starts with the psychology of any leader. So if we don't have the psychology as leaders, we don't have the ability to influence the people that are serving alongside us or working. And the biggest chokehold on anything is also this, is always the psychology of its leader. So then I get to myself and I say, hey, if 67% of GDP is based off of small business owners, we just don't realize, most business owners don't realize how much power they have, right? Most business owners don't realize that this is actually really a team game, and that we actually can do so much more by coming together. We just got to pay more attention to what each other is saying. And one of the things that actually came to me as well is that Socrates was actually the origin of saying building the new. He's the original writer of that emphasis. of, hey, this Socratic method and like asking deeper questions allows people to then discover more of themselves so that they can choose to see the reflection. It's kind of like this is the thing. And so as a result, it's like, okay, if business leaders were to spend more time being curious about one another, and instead of instead of saying, hey, I don't actually have to do everything myself. I can stand on the shoulders of another great leader that maybe has done it 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 years ahead of me. Then there would be a lot less wasting time, way more shared responsibility, and an ability to move things faster forward into a growth curve of infinite possibility. So, how do you feel that from last year, or sorry, last century, last year. For me, I guess, and you in our mind might be last year because 100 years can go like this, but um, last century, the entrepreneurship, was developed at a time during the Depression, and people started to shake up and create. What do you think could be a pattern that could be shifted now and created in terms of entrepreneurship and conscious business design that also creates a change in leadership and in oneself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I share the same view as you that business has a responsibility to really show up in a much more humane way with a load more female energy, than male energy. Because essentially, business, if you really get cut to the chase and you really talk to the movers and shakers, they feel like they're in a high stakes competition where it's dog eat dog, and it's your money in my pocket and, you die or I die. And that's the truth of it. That's how business is. And that's pure male energy on steroids. And I think that if you're into yoga or Tai Chi or any form of conscious practice, then it's rather silly and limiting and hypocritical if you think that it just exists on the mat or in the shala or the sala where you do the practice. If you don't bring it into the boardroom, metaphorically speaking, you don't bring it into the office, into the work, then what's the point? Yoga is not about doing good postures so you can look in the mirror and impress yourself or impress anybody else who's around. If it's not helping you to calm your mind and therefore being able to take that calmness, that connection with ancient wisdom into all spheres of your life, then what's the point? If it's not enabling you to have a better relationship or be better with your kids or treat, any other human being in a better, more humane, compassionate way, then what's the point? There is no point. So I totally share your view that there is not just an opportunity, there is an imperative, there is an absolute urgent calling for people in any sphere of business to recognize that they have incredible power. Because, sadly, the new God these days is money, materialism, power, control. And business has an enormous amount of potential to influence. So I think it's all about the individual showing up as the best version of themselves. Yes, we come together in collectives. Yes, we collaborate, no question. But each person has got to show up. It's like Mahatma Gandhi said when people, or rather, sorry, Kennedy, JFK said when people asked him, what's the state going to do for me? And he said, well, how about you ask yourself what you're going to do for the state? And this is such a profound perspective because the world will change when enough individuals change. And if we don't like our leaders, look in the mirror because a collective of us is what creates our leaders. You want better leaders? Show up as a better version of yourself and create that vibration in your community and you know, the people that you connect with. So it all comes back to this. This life is a spiritual life. The invitation is wake the heck up.
Brother, what is next for you right now? What do you feel is most meaningful in your experience, in your journey, and I'd love to know what we can do way more collaboratively and how I can add even more value to what you've been devoting your path to. Uh, I'm curious.
No, I mean, that's very lovely that you asked that question. I mean, let me answer it in two ways. What's next for me? In a very micro sense, I recognize my humanity and I'm just as much of a screw up as every other human being. That's how we're meant to be. We're not meant to be perfect. We're meant to be imperfect. And that's the beauty of being a human being. We have rough edges. We haven't solved all of our problems in life. We have our demons. And, this growth path that we're on will never end. We don't peel back the seventh layer of the onion and suddenly it's all blissful and we're in nirvana. I don't think that's what it's about. It's endlessly pulling back the layers of the onion till we, uncover more and more of those unconscious blocks that we have, the limiting beliefs that we have. So the first part of my answer to you is I need to keep checking on me. I need to keep looking in the mirror, not beating myself up, not being hard on myself, but recognizing that I can do better. Recognizing that that isn't the best version of me, whether it's relationship with my mother, my brother, my, colleague in business, whatever it is. That's the first step. The second element, in more of a macro sense, is that I believe I've been put here on planet Earth to have a positive impact. That's what excites me. That's all I want to get involved in. Nothing else turns me on, in a business sense, in a big picture sense, than having a positive impact. So I think, we've already begun the process. I don't think we need to sort of map it out. I think these things will just, the flags for the future will show themselves, the stage posts will show themselves. We've taken the first step, and that's always the most important. And as long as the intention is clear, the vision is clear, and the shared, mission and vision are there, if there's alignment, then life takes care. We're just listening to life. That's all we're here for.
Your blessing, brother. I honestly, I'm so grateful that we had this deep communication from inside. And it's interesting because I told you I was, going through some challenges recently, and there is a miracle in life. And those miracles in life, it's so funny because all of a sudden these great people show up. And it's like there was a challenge the day before, the following day I heard from Chris. And it's like, wow. And it's so nice to feel this synchronicity, in this golden rule of life, this, hey, give more than you ever expect to receive, and your life will be truly fulfilled. Napoleon Hill calls it the divine economy in his books, The Laws of Success. And I find that the more that this kind of experience starts to happen in life, at least for me, like all of a sudden there's like these thousand other synchronicities that happen from this side because it's all interconnected, as you know. And so for me, this has been like super passionate and exciting because it's constantly inspiring me. It's constantly like, whoa, what's going on here? What's going on here? And then these like unique nuances show up, and it just continues to allow me to allow the minds of uncertainty to really just continue to trust in the coherence of the heart's integrity. And this to me is like, it's inspiring. And I find if every person could ever like just choose that, if every person in this planet could choose that passion, could choose to just walk that life, walk that path, I feel, I really believe that, we could really create the playground. And one thing, Chris, when I was a little boy, I would go to the playground, and my mom or my dad, they would always say, oh, I would grab everybody like, hey, you guys want to come play? Let's go play together. And I would like just encourage us all to play. I like being like together, I really like that. I really find that it's always fun. And so now I just feel, because I've traveled so much and have built such great friendships, and deep ones, like really meaningful ones. Now it's like I feel the same way, except now the playground has become planet Earth. It's like let's play, let's figure this out, and let's do this together. And I think that that brings the greatest joy, when we can tap into this childlike behavior, this innocence, this curiosity, then we really become the models of possibility for not just our next generations. And I realize too, for me, brother, maybe that's why I went on this path, because when I got divorced at the age of 30, uh, she wanted to have children. And I was like, I can't have kids right now. I don't feel like I could be a positive role model. And it was really something really difficult to look at. And maybe if I had the tools to, by the way, amazing woman, amazing, God bless her, she's an amazing person, a great mirror. And I've had great mirrors since then, this feminine power. And one of the things that I discovered in myself was I just wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy. And so how could I bring another beautiful soul into this life and encourage them to fulfill their dreams if I don't have the courage to fulfill mine? And I think that this is something that now I feel just inspired by. So uh, thank you for being this type of role model, in my life, and walking this path ahead of us, and choosing to put these um, stakes in the ground. You know, thank you for being you, brother.
I mean, thank you for saying it. It's very humble of you to put it that way. I think, friendships and connections only work when there's alignment and when both parties gain something from it, on some level or hopefully multiple levels. So it's never one way. If there's some benefit to you, there's benefit to me, and that's just how life works. But if I might just comment on one thing you said, which I really like, which is that I think we all have a unique design in life. This is really what Dharma, what is meant by Dharma. But if we want to look at the different models, whatever they might be, whether it's human design or, looking at different avatars, numerology, whatever our particular perspective is, we each have a design. And part of understanding your Dharma, part of being fulfilled and happy in life is recognizing your Dharma. And what screams out to me about you, even though I haven't known you very long, is that you're a connector, you're a networker. You are the guy in the playground, exactly what you said, who says, hey, come on, guys, let's go play. Let's do this. You bring people together, you connect them, you motivate, you inspire. And that's living your mission, that's living your design. And that's beautiful. And just one other thing I wanted to say based on what you were saying is that whether we're seeing good things happen in our lives or we're seeing very challenging things, I try if I can, and I fail miserably at this often, but I try if I can to remember that life is always happening for me. Everything is for my benefit, everything. So if beautiful things are happening and good things are showing up, then I put my hands together and I say thank you. But even with the difficult moments and the challenging moments, at the end of the day, literally the end of the day, as I'm just about to drop off to sleep, I remember the day and I think back to what's gone on. And if there's good stuff, I put my hands together. And if there's bad stuff, I put my hands together and I say thank you for how I can learn from this, how I can grow. Because it's all and only happening for us, not to us, for us. And I don't say this to lecture or to try and be patronizing. I say it because this is my self-talk. This is what I keep reminding myself about.
Thank you, brother. I would love to ask if there's any way that people are curious to know more about Ashiyana, uh, the best me, and the programs to then also integrate, after retreats or any other retreats, or any ways to contact you or get curious about the different retreat centers that you have around the world. What is the best way that people can connect with you or discover more about all the magic that you've been bringing, for decades?
Thank you. That's very sweet. Well, I mean, I guess we have a website, ashiyana.com, ashyan.com. And we have two Instagram handles, one for me, one for the main organization, Ashiyana. So for the organization Ashiyana, it's Ashiyana Yoga, Ashiyana Yoga. And for me, it's Chris Best Me. So maybe that's the best way to put it out.
Awesome. Cool. So, and thank you. And actually, I have one last question before we finish. If you had 3 days left to live, Chris, and I know you'll have a lot more. One of my friends just passed yesterday. He was
Oh,
also
I'm
on this
sorry.
beautiful podcast. He lives in Bali. Bless his heart. He actually, I want to share that what I podcasted him. I was living at Ashiyana. So when we had the interview online, I was going through a lot of deep processes at Ashiyana, and he had just passed 2 days ago. So everything is divine. You know, he's here with us. Good, good. Bless your heart, Aaron. Uh, if you had 3 days left to live, Chris, uh, what would you be doing?
I mean, what comes to mind immediately is I plan a little get together in 3 days' time for those people that I truly, truly love and want to have around me before my passing. I'd probably spend the next 3 days inviting them and making it happen, and inviting and maybe paying for some flights and whatever else, and getting them all together here in Spain or wherever I happen to be, and just being with those I love. I'd spend some quiet time. I love time on my own. I'd do my yoga. I'd keep it simple, eat good food, um, and just be in communion with Mother Nature and those that I love.
Amen. Brother, thank you for all your wisdom and grace. Is there anything else that you want to share?
No, I think we've had a pretty good sharing. I really appreciate you inviting me. I thank you. I thank you for your openness and your willingness to collaborate and your humility. And long may this continue, this collaboration.
Yes. Big love.
Hey everyone, and thank you so much for listening to the Resilient Minds. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure to go comment and like and follow us on iTunes or Spotify. And make sure, please make sure that if you really love this, to share this episode. And make sure that you're inviting all your friends to like it as we continue to unfold what the beauty of our minds does. More importantly, how powerful our heart level of intelligence can be when we combine our heart and our brain together. And more importantly, make sure you take the time to take a look at what we're doing at Balanced Media Ventures and how we can actually really support you in doubling your impact, your income, and your influence, and how you can bring your life's greatest vision into your purpose and create it from that level of reality. Talk to you soon.